there's some interesting stuff.
Cool. So another Gambit Stratagem podcast. Stratagem with myself, Andrew Essig, and
Shawn Crocker.
I'm going to let him say his own name.
I wasn't ready as
most of the time. Shawn, what have you been into?
I've been watching a lot of CrossFit videos.
Yeah?
Old ones. I actually went all the way back to Every Second Counts.
Because of your, because you're studying for the L3, or how'd you get down that?
Yeah, so I started studying to take my CrossFit Level 3 trainer cert. Basically, the only study material they give you is, hey, here's the CrossFit Journal.
Yeah, which is for the lay person, or even the CrossFit coach that's considering going that route. The Level 1 is a 2-day seminar
that they give you a study pack for. They give you like a seminar package.
They give you a
study material.
Yeah. And that you can get printed into a book, and then you take honestly a pretty easy exam. Like if you've been there, you're present for the whole weekend, and you've paid attention, you can pass.
Yeah, I would say like if you've gone through the Level 1,
it's like 50 questions or something.
If you've read the study guide, even just once, you're going to be fine. There's a couple throw-off questions that make you think it's a little harder than it is, but yeah, as long as you listen, as long as you...
And you don't need like a perfect score to pass.
No.
The Level 2 is a 2-day seminar as well, but it's all practical, hands-on stuff where you're actually coaching people and then being coached on coaching. It's a very different experience. And then there's also an exam at the end of that. Again, probably a little harder exam than the Level 1.
They also give you study supplies.
Yeah, and again, if you've been there, so for reference, and I'm a high luck test taker, I would say. So like when I originally took the L1, I'll date myself, when I originally took the L1, there was no test. So I had to go back at some point and just show up and take the test. Yeah. And I didn't study, I just showed up and took it and passed it.
Yeah.
And then the L2, we did take a test. We took the L2 right after it was converted. Actually, I think it might have still been called the Coach's Prep Course. It used to just be, there was no like L3 or L4. It was just kind of like L1. And then like people within CrossFit were kind of designated Level 2, Level 3, but it wasn't like a publicly available thing. So Kelly and I went and took the Coach's Prep Course, and that was the same kind of deal. There was an exam there. Didn't find it to be super challenging. And then the L3...
I did think the Level 2, just to interject, I thought the Level 2 test was easier than the Level 1.
Oh, really?
And it could have just been because I had been coaching for a while at that
The scope is a little more narrow, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little bit
because the L1 is like nutrition, movement, it's kind of programming, it's a little bit of everything.
And honestly, it might have just been because when I took my Level 1, I had only been CrossFitting for 6 months. So I was like new to...
That'll make a difference.
Yeah.
And then the L3 is an exam only. You just book, you sign up for it, you pay a fee, you show that you have X number of hours coaching and X number of experience, and then you book at a testing site and you show up and take the exam. So I've done the L3, Kelly's obviously done her L3, and I don't think anyone else in the gym has, and you're going to study for yours. And the guidance they give you, as you mentioned earlier, is my favorite, because they just say, go and read the CrossFit Journal articles, which
are expansive. There's
There's like 10,000.
Yeah, I mean, there's like
more,
the CrossFit Journal started 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's like there's no shortage of things to read.
Yeah.
And it's like they don't give you guidance on what's applicable. They don't, like, it's just.
Yeah, so what are your favorite throwback videos?
Oh, man. So Every Second Counts is fun to watch now because it was from 2009, the CrossFit documentary.
Is that when Kalipa won?
Yes. I think it's just really fun to go back in time to where like the games was still at the ranch and it's like a barbecue.
And I think in 2009, was there a regional even? Or did you just show up?
That's a great question.
So the original games, you just signed up and showed up. Yeah. It was like doing a local comp.
Yeah. So like it's just fun to see like all of like the people everyone know now, like back then.
Spieler.
So that was kind of a nice little trip down memory lane. I think one of my favorite videos that I watched recently was Chris Hinshaw is like the subject matter expert within CrossFit about aerobic conditioning. Like he's
aerobic capacity,
which is his triathlete guy.
Yeah.
Like he's the guy when you're talking about running, biking, rowing, any of the monostructural stuff. And he was doing this seminar at, I think it was Mayhem, He had a bunch of games athletes. Sarah Sigmund's daughter was there. Obviously, Rich Froning was there. And he was doing like this really simple workout, just single unders. Like single unders, and I think it was like burpees to a plate, and then maybe like high knees or something. Like something very innocuous.
I think I've seen that. It sounds super familiar.
And like 90% of the games athletes could not do a single under to save their life.
Yeah.
And so I was watching this a couple weeks ago, and like this kind of comes into like the most recent games event. There were single unders, like you had to do 75 single unders unbroken.
Yeah, but we're going to talk about that later.
Right. So it was just kind of a funny segue into
Yeah.
like all of that stuff. And yeah, so that's kind of what I've been up to. What about you?
The other thing, if you're going through those before I talk about my thing, is what did they call it? There was like an athlete retreat where they used to go to
Summit? Well, no, that's a trainer summit.
I forget. No, it wasn't the trainer summit. It was like they only did it, I feel like, for 2 or 3 years, but they went to like Montana or somewhere, and they just would call like it was like Graham Holmberg, Rich Froning.
Yeah. Dave Lipson was there.
Yeah, and they just went out and like stayed in a couple. They went into like Tahoe or somewhere, and they're like staying in a couple nice like lake houses.
Yeah.
They don't even think it was like a competition. They were just like working out and doing ridiculous crap for like a week or whatever it was, or a long weekend. I remember Graham Holmberg and Chris Spieler doing 2 minutes of max double unders like on a dock out in a lake, like barefoot or something. And I just thought it was so cool. And then they cut to them like, just hanging out in a hot tub, just talking about what it's like to be a...
Yeah, it was like a weird CrossFit version of Big Brother. Or whatever that like reality show is, or like Real World.
There's some cool stuff.
There's some gems.
Yeah, kind of in the infancy of CrossFit. My thing is totally not CrossFit related, but I watched a video on Facebook, like Facebook TV or whatever, FB TV or whatever they're calling it. Just the videos that pop up like in your feed. And for some reason, one popped up in my feed and I watched it, and now it just recommends it to me all the time, and I keep watching him. It's this guy that plays basketball called The Professor. Have you ever heard of this guy?
No.
It's a white guy who's probably...
Is it Brent Fikowski?
But, I mean, kind of. It's like he's. I don't want to misquote his height, but he looks like he's like 6 foot, maybe.
Sure.
Maybe. Like not an overly tall guy.
Tall.
White guy, just got the side of his head shaved, kind of like nothing, pretty unassuming looking guy, but balls his absolute butt off and just smokes people. And all these videos are like, the professor schools a trash talker. And he just rolls up to places like he'll go to Miami and he just like rolls up and plays street ball. He'll just walk up and let guys, they'll be like, there's these videos where it looks like he's standing there with like a 7 foot tall black guy who looks like he plays ball like that's his
NBA,
life.
like that,
and you're like, man, just based on genetics and like setup here, it looks like this dude's, couldn't possibly. And this guy's just in his face talking trash. We put $100 on it. Let's put $100 on it. He's up in his face going like, better have my money. You got money? Like, show me your, like just getting aggressive. Like you think a fight's gonna happen. And then this guy, Professor, just starts like, pulls some moves you can't believe. And he'll dribble through the other guy, between the other guy's legs. He's like, you see those videos where like somebody like fakes somebody out so hard they fall on the ground? That's this dude. That's his thing. It's like watching real life Harlem Globetrotters, and he just annihilates people. And whatever he does, I don't know how he makes his money, but he pulls up in like McLarens and stuff sometimes. So he'll pull up. One of the videos, he pulls up in a McLaren to like a street ball court outside Miami somewhere, and just pops on his favorite pair of shoes and just walks up and starts cleaning house. And I could just watch like 4 or 5 of these videos back to back because
I love it.
It's funny because you'll watch a video and it's like he's kind of doing okay, gets a couple points, and usually it's like one-on-one, they play 2-11 or something. And he'll be doing okay, and then it'll be like a title will flash across the bottom that says, then the professor turns it up a notch, and then is just like a totally different person. Like he was just getting warmed up, and then he's like, all right, this guy's pretty good, I better pull out all my tricks. And then he just starts smoking whoever he's playing.
That's probably how he makes his money.
Super entertaining. He could. I doubt most of these guys are putting thousands of dollars on a 11-point basketball game and actually have the money to back it up.
$200 with some YouTube views or Facebook views, and
I haven't looked him up. That's the thing. I just found him on like Facebook videos. I haven't found him on YouTube, but yeah, he probably does. And one of the videos was like, "Why are you not in the NBA?" And he basically was like, "It's politics. Like they don't want the higher ups in the NBA, like, I didn't go to college, so they don't want guys that didn't go to college.
Sure.
Or like some college. And that's a whole nother discussion, but it was basically like, if you're not going through the
system,
they don't really want you in it.
Sure.
Because they're just like, yeah, if this guy's so good, because you see him just smoke people. They're like a foot taller than him. It's wild. And he's not dunking. Never dunks. He's just doing layups. And he'll just, man, it's wild. I would love to see him like actually play a game with NBA players. Because I'm not a big basketball guy, but it was just really fascinating. Because when you watch the NBA, you see everybody's 7 feet tall, and you just wonder, couldn't somebody who's 6 foot tall or 5'10", who's really good at dribbling and
Charles
stuff?
Barkley back in the day, he was relatively short.
Well, I remember Michael Jordan always used to look like he was normally sized and not overly tall. And he's 6'6".
Oh, wow.
I think, if I'm not mistaken. He's not short.
Yeah, that's wild.
And if there's a photo, if I would actually take the time to comb through our podcast videos and put photos up and stuff, which maybe I'll do, there was a photo of me up at Reebok headquarters with Kelly and Austin Maliolo and I'm trying to remember who else was there, but a couple of like OG CrossFitters, like games level athletes, and one of our old coaches, Matt Martin's on Instagram, and he says, Andrew looks like an NBA player next to this lineup, and I look at it, and I'm like, that's true, because I'm 6'1", Kelly's about 5'1" to 5'2", and everybody's kind of close to Kelly's height. I don't know how tall Austin is, but he can't be more than 5'6" or so. So I'm just towering over everybody, and I'm like, I'm not even that tall. So it's just funny to see that kind of stuff.
Right.
So the CrossFit Games are happening.
Yeah.
Now that
so I mean, a really interesting year. First year since the inception that Dave Castro hasn't programmed the games.
Yeah.
I know leading up to it, I've listened to a lot of so Adrian Bosman was formerly the head judge for CrossFit. I mean, you want to talk about a CrossFit nerd, like that guy's been there since day one. He's been along the whole ride through it all. I don't think there could be a better person to program the games. I mean, outside of Dave. I bring this up because leading up to it, I've listened to a lot of podcasts and a lot of things like Adrian was talking about. I didn't want people to look at the programming this year and be like, that's Adrian. Like, that's clearly not Dave.
Yeah.
Right? And I think he missed that a little bit. Because I see, so Boz has a great podcast with Pat Sherwood called, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name. We'll put it up there, but you can go and you can listen to kind of all of the things that Boz thinks about. A lot of these events he's talked about in this podcast. So it's funny looking at all the events as someone who's been a huge fan of Boz for years.
Is it Coffee Pods and Wads?
No.
Is it Get With the Programming?
No.
Is it the CrossFit Games podcast?
No, it's none of those.
Talking Elite Fitness?
None of those. Keep going.
Whatever, you keep
Anyways, so it's funny, knowing all of the things that Boz thinks about, the things that he likes, his background. You can see a lot of that in the programming. But also to that point, I think the programming this year has been phenomenal thus far. I know a lot of people may not agree with me there.
Yeah. But I think we're a little bit...
Very not random.
Oh.
Very
That didn't pop up at all. And I searched for Adrian Bosman and it didn't even pop up. So Adrian, if you're watching, and I know you are,
you don't have anything else going on.
You need to work on your tags on your podcast.
Well, that was something
Tag
else
yourself.
was mentioned. Someone was like, yeah, there's this amazing podcast with Adrian Bosman and Pat Sherwood, two CrossFit OGs, two of the most brilliant fitness minds out there, and they get 47 views per podcast. It's like someone needs to be pushing these guys.
The podcast world is so diluted now.
Yeah. There's if you guys are bored and want to just nerd out on CrossFit stuff, listen to that podcast. It is second only to ours.
I'm adding it to my second only to the Stratagem podcast. I'm adding it to my queue.
So, what have you thought about the games thus far?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I honestly I didn't look at the events and just go, oh, Dave's not programming this. But, as much as I have respect and appreciation for everything that Dave programmed, I think when you have one person executing a vision and it's the same person every year, you're going to tend, as somebody who programmed for a gym for 8 years or however long,
you're going to have a flavor.
Yeah, you have a flavor, and it's distinct when we talk about things and you, sometimes people will say, like, did I program this or did Kelly program it? And like, I can see the difference between my programming and Kelly's programming. Like, we do burpees once to twice a week, every week when Kelly programs. I would go 2 weeks at a time without burpees.
Yeah, and like that's actually,
burpees.
that's an interesting point, because like I was programming for a gym before I came to Gambit, and my programming was very, like, you could tell when I programmed. As much as we as programmers try to avoid that happening, like we have all these places and systems in check to avoid that as much as possible, but you're always going to see
but you can still have, and I also think you can have all the variance and the correct mixture of things and balance and still have flavor.
Sure.
Like any other art.
Yeah.
Or as Glassman would always say, the magic is in the programming. It's like, that's to me like the art is in the programming.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing.
No.
Necessarily. So when I see the events, I think they're very good events. They're a little bit, like I called one of the events wacky earlier.
Yeah.
Which you thought was funny, but I mean wacky in like a positive way. Like it's they were jumping over a lot, like to watch it. I always look at it from the perspective of people who are kind of outside of CrossFit. Are they looking at this like, what are the pundits saying?
Yeah, and I have a hard time having that outside of CrossFit view, because like we've been talking, like I'm going through like training, like studying for all of this stuff. So I'm reading all of like where CrossFit came from, where it has gone, where it's progressed through the years. And obviously like I'm immersed in CrossFit all day long, every day, as are you. But I look at like a CrossFit nerd, like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I remember back in 2007 article journal where they're talking about, going back to the basics and training progressions, regardless of whether you're an Olympic athlete or a new person. So anyways, continue.
I lost my train of thought.
You like to look at it from outside view.
Oh yeah. I just look at it, I think, from the point almost like a preemptive defensive, where I'm thinking like, well, what are people going to say about this?
Yeah.
And so I look at something and go, oh, that's a little wacky. I think like, well, there's probably somebody who's going to say, well, that's, like I said earlier, like too high a volume on jumping. Well, you've got these coaches that are looking at stuff from a totally different, from a basketball perspective or a football perspective, where that is too much jumping for a football athlete, but that's not.
If you're looking to train a max
what
vertical,
CrossFit is.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that look at it critically are comparing it, and the big one is the weightlifters, like people from the Olympic or now I guess the weightlifting community.
I think they're still on for Paris.
Savage.
Neither here nor there.
The people from the weightlifting community will look at CrossFitters and say, it's unbelievable these guys train so much and they can only lift X. Hey, if you, like as you've mentioned, if you dig into the CrossFit archives or you just look at the basic tenets of CrossFit, you're talking about the components of fitness that are on our boards back there. There's 10 components you have to spread your fitness across. Like, we're not just like, okay, take any one of those weightlifters and have them row a marathon. Or
God forbid, run a mile.
Run a mile, and you're going to find out.
I love weightlifting.
You're going to find out real quick where that balance comes into play, and you put all that out. Put everything else about the argument aside. Like the weights that CrossFit athletes have been able to lift is consistently gone up and up and up every year that the CrossFit Games happen.
They are in a workout after shuttle sprints. Like we're talking like sub 130, 400 meter runs. They're doing 6-7 jerks at 300 pounds for the guys, 200 for the ladies. Like, I mean, hell, 6-7 years ago, CrossFit athletes couldn't clean 300, let alone jerk it.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was going to say, too, is the old benchmark workouts. Like we just did that workout.
Yeah, they're almost not even applicable.
Yeah, anymore. We did that workout, Elizabeth, and I've heard different opinions on it. I heard Chase Ingram on the Games broadcast yesterday say, well, there's never been power cleans associated with this. And I'm like, hey, has there not been? Because in my experience, they always just said cleans. Yeah. And so at some point, I think it was interpreted as, well, it's however you can clean it. And back in some point in time, 135 was a relatively heavy clean for males and 95 for females. So a lot of athletes might want to squat clean that optimally or at some point during the workout. So I've always done it. For the most part, I usually do it with power cleans because but they're just way more enjoyable and
for sure.
and faster. But now we're at a point where 135 is like, well, yeah, for most people, most people who consistently train and do CrossFit, 135 is like, 21's going to be unbroken, 15's going to be like that whole workout's going to be unbroken. So
it's
in
interesting.
Fran, we're seeing like insane times on Fran. At
back in the old
pounds.
L1s, like Fran was one of the workouts, and like you got to like if you had a sub 5-minute Fran, like you were hot shit coming into the gym. Now
I remember a guy did a 249 or something at my L1, and everybody was like, "Oh,
whoa, yeah!"
And it's just
it's like nowadays, Fran's not even.
I have a
appropriate
249
test of
Fran
fitness
now.
for these guys because it comes down to how tall are you.
So
it's just interesting.
So anyway, what I think about what's really cool about the events is, and maybe it's hard to say, it's probably impossible to say whether it's more down to the field of athletes or the programming, is that you're not seeing on either side, the male or female side, like one athlete. Like, Ricky Garrard has been comfortably in the lead this first couple of days.
For what it's worth, we're filming on a Friday.
Yeah.
So we still have 2 more days of competition.
But he's not dominating every event.
No,
like you've seen in past years sometimes where you just see like
100 points ahead. He could literally sit out 2 events and be still
or you'd see. I feel like a year or two ago you see Tia show up and you're kind of like, well, how's well, I remember Fraser doing a running event, or there was like a 5K trail run or something, and it was like, well, Fraser's really good on the barbell and he's really good at this, but like, how's he going to do? And then he just decimates the trail run, and you're just not seeing that this year, which to me, on first glance, tells me that the programming is good because there's enough variance, there's enough new things that you're shaking up the top of the leaderboard. And I know we've talked extensively about the kind of skills progression ladder with the double unders and stuff, and you mentioned single unders earlier, so we'll come full circle to that.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite workouts.
Yeah,
and I know
initially looking at it, I said, hey, we ended up at this double under crossover thing, but I think it should have been triple unders, and I'll stand by that. I'll put my flag in that.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
But first round started with single unders.
So the first round was pegboards, using your feet.
Yeah, I mean the pegboards, whatever.
And then so I think the fun part of this was the
jump
75 unbroken single unders.
Yep.
So if you tripped, you had to start back at 0.
Yep. And the handstand.
And I really liked the.
To me, the pegboard was like if you have good capacity on the pegboard, using your legs or not using your legs
it's about
is
the same.
Whatever. And obviously there were athletes struggling with that, and I don't want to diminish that. But like this workout was really about that progression on the rope and the progression on the handstand stuff.
Yeah. Which kind of harkens back. There's old articles written, and this is where like if you ever listen, like if the athletes listen to Very Not Random, they should have seen this coming, because Bosman loves jump ropes, and you're not gonna find someone that likes gymnastics progressions more than Adrian Bosman.
Well, yeah, and I picked up on single unders back. I did kickboxing for a brief moment, and the coach or the trainer would have us jump rope just singles for like 15 to 20 minutes at a time,
which is insane. I mean, we do a 1-minute single under in the workout and we're dying.
Yeah.
But so we saw like a lot of high level. I mean, Tia was one of them that just could not string together 75 unbroken single unders.
Yeah.
Which tells me, and this is I think what the point of the workout was.
For sure could, but it's a high pressure environment also.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. We don't want to overlook that. But I think this kind of harkens back to like training the basics, right? Like before I came to Gambit, I just did double unders, never did single unders. Even warming up, it was just, okay, I'm just going to jump right into doubles.
Yeah.
Now that I'm here, it's like I can single under. I've been working backwards single unders. Like I work all of these different iterations because it makes the double under better.
I remember physically not being able to complete a single under.
Yeah.
Like having done strictly double unders for a year or so and just kind of like forgetting about. And I remember at one point being more comfortable with muscle ups than I was with pull ups.
Yeah. I remember, so I did a competition and they did not allow butterfly pull ups. And I could not do a kipping pull up to save my life. I had to do singles. just because
How do you not allow butterfly?
It was like a beginner competition.
Oh.
And yeah, so like
That's a whole nother. That's lame.
But yeah, it goes back to like you want to continuously train the basics, right? And that goes back to virtuosity. Again, another article, right? Like doing the common uncommonly well.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's gotten us not to you know be braggadocious about it, but I think one of the reasons we've had success as a gym and as with some of our competitive athletes is because I always used to obsess over the weird stuff. Like when I found a new weird thing. When I figured out fingertip push-ups were a thing, when I was in college, I became kind of obsessed with like different types of push-ups. And you'll still see like I program I took this like kung fu class for a while in college. Very casual. Yeah. Just like cool little thing to do once a week for a while. And he would always have us warm up with this push-up pyramid, which was like, you know, flat push-ups. I think it went to knuckles, then it was like diamond, and then we did, I think there was one other, backhand push-ups. Absolutely brutal. Yeah. And then fingertips, and then I think clappers or single arm was the last one.
Yeah, which we did when we were in Egan.
So I still like to throw that in once in a while because I just think it's one of the most clean examples of that, where you can have somebody who's super fit, good at ring dips, good at handstand push-ups, good at push-ups, and then you throw them a fingertip or a single arm or whatever, any level of that, and it could stop them dead in their tracks. Yeah. And I've always just been fascinated by that. So I've always been big on making sure we're working weighted dips, weighted pull-ups, strict dips.
The thinking being like you
tempo
fail at your margins, right? So like you have a greater breadth of.
Yeah. Well, and one of my favorite quotes ever is from an anime called Ghost in the Shell, and the main character at one point says, "Over specialize and you breed in weakness." And they weren't talking about CrossFit, but damn if that's not accurate. I don't think CrossFit existed at that time, but maybe it did. It's like 91. I don't know, somewhere along there. Yeah. But yeah, so like that's so true.
And that's just like, I love the beauty of that test because it went from single unders to double unders to, we can argue about the crossover double under all day, should have been triple under, shouldn't have been, whatever. But even better than that is that the handstand went from an L sit to a press to handstand. Yeah. Which
that's wild.
Unfortunately we didn't get to see.
And you can argue about
a lot of people, but we saw one do it.
Like I said, you can argue about the crossover double under thing. But we were talking and you said, well, yeah, I tried it and it wasn't too bad. And then I did it, I tried it and immediately was able to do one. Yeah. I'm watching it as they describe it and I'm like, man, I've tried double under, crossover double unders before and have whipped myself in the face and head and have not been able to do one. I don't know how that's crazy for them to throw that out. Like triple unders is a way more logical progression because I can do triple unders. But then when I saw the technique they were doing, like it's crossovers.
Yeah, so you do a double under, one's under is cross, the other is out.
Yeah. And then I was able to do one like on the first or second attempt. And it was kind of like, all right, I can still only do one at a time, but I could get through 25 reps pretty well. So, hey, and I think I like where we see that happen on occasion where we had the clearest picture was, to me, it's a return to that year we had the softball throw, the med ball toss, and there was an L sit hold or something where people were kind of like, man, I don't know, this isn't really CrossFit. Is this really CrossFit? Is this really testing? And it's like, yeah, it's absolutely testing capacity. It's accuracy, it's balance, it's all these things.
And we saw some, like still to this day, some of the most embarrassing displays of athleticism.
Yeah, I'll never forget Jason Kalipa trying to throw a softball. But like a sidearm.
We probably can't superimpose it over the video, but I swear, go like find that video. It is the funniest.
It looked like me trying to throw with my left arm. It just looked like he had two non-dominant arms when it comes to throwing a ball. It's wild.
One of the craziest things I've ever seen.
All right. Well, we will, I think, shoot another podcast or something like after the games, I think, and do a recap next week. But like so far, I really like what we're seeing.
Yeah, I like that the leaderboard's shaken up. I think Tia's now in first as we record this, but she didn't come into the day in first, which is wild.
Yeah. Well, and that's you used
Mayhem's
to see that.
not first. So like
You used to
Rich
see that with
Froning's
Froning
out.
all the time too, though. He would come in and look like absolute trash for 2 days.
Yeah.
And do really badly in like a swimming or endurance event, and then just as soon as we shift gears as soon as he can get onto a barbell, and kind of shift gears into more classic CrossFit stuff, he takes off.
Yeah. So
Like a
I'm
rocket.
excited. I haven't been this excited in games in a few years.
Hey,
so.
I mean, how do you feel about Ricky Garrard being in first place?
I hate it. I want him to lose.
I feel bad saying I want him to not win. I just want someone else to win.
I appreciate that he served his time, and I said I wasn't gonna bring it up. I'm gonna bring it up. I did. He's allegedly only been tested once in his 4-year ban.
According to
the
interview
he did
you
with
read.
Chase Ingram on the CrossFit podcast.
Just to be clear about our sources,
Just to be clear about it. Again, hearsay.
We're both very unsure about how
I
accurate
wasn't
that
there.
is. I find that really hard to believe, but he was only tested once. But
if I had and maybe I should do more research. If he was tested regularly through the 4 years.
Also, if it was like completely random, where they're just like, hey, we're going to show up once during this 4 years, and you're not going to know when it's coming.
Like, cool. He served his time. He screwed up. I'm okay with that. He did say in that same interview that he hasn't taken a supplement since 2019. So, be that as it is, I just don't like cheaters.
I mean, I don't. It's a whole nother topic we could do, and maybe we will. But it's like I think in my head, I don't feel right seeing him win these events, and some of them very dominantly after he failed a drug test. But like you said, he did.
He
served his 4-year ban, and it's like, what are you going to do? Ban him for life? Is that fair?
That's not.
And I don't know that that's the right thing either, but.
Test him
Man,
weekly.
I hope they were.
Weekly.
I really hope he got tested more than once.
Yeah. And again, who knows? This is all hearsay. It's just based off of.
Yeah. As always, our podcast and videos are backed up by almost no scientific evidence or.
In fact, we literally looked up the article 10 minutes before we hit play.
Yeah. So anyway, that's our podcast.
Here we are.
Thank you for joining us. Yeah, we'll do another CrossFit Games update. Probably when it's over, I think. And we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Andrew Essig.
Shawn Crocker.
See you next time.
Peace out, Girl Scouts.